Accept the recommendation July 13th from the chairman of the Transportation Committee.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Grill, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, am I to assume that the expense of $427.54, Mr. Mayor, will be borne by the transit, or will they be billed for that particular amount? As stated by the treasurer, the approximate cost.
Well, the recommendation is that the city would pay for the $427. That's what the cost of offering the service is.
So they would not be paid, there would be no cost involved?
Not to the Friendship Society, no. That's my understanding of the recommendation from Alderman Horswill.
Well, I think if it came to the public's intention, Mr. Mayor, I think they would probably question it, but I won't question it, because when the mayor and council of Attendees came to Nelson, we did have the service of the bus, and we accommodated them to Castlegar on the tour, and this is something similar. This is probably could happen on a yearly basis, so we must be, it's almost on perhaps on contingency from year to year, and in order to pay this $427.54, Mr. Mayor, I would take that out of the promotion account. I would not take it from the transit whatsoever, because this is a promotion. It's promoting the city, and I can't see it being taken out of the transit account. That's the only thing that I'm concerned with. And charity begins at home, and tourism starts at home. And I really believe that this is where it should come from, is promotion account. We have that much money there.
Thanks, Alderman Grill. Alderman Horswill.
If I might respond, Your Worship, basically my feeling in recommending that we approve this request is that we are reciprocating the hospitality which our students have received in Japan to a group of Japanese students who are visiting our city. My understanding is that Japanese hospitality is extremely generous to an extreme, and that if we don't reciprocate within reasonable means, that we could even be causing offense, which we certainly don't wish to do. In terms of which account, I really didn't feel that that was an important issue, although I would point out that if it comes out of the transportation budget, that a certain portion of that will be borne by the province, whereas if it comes out of publicity, it'll all be borne by the Nelson taxpayers. So from that point of view, it might be a little wiser to put it in the transportation budget, if we can.
We could ask their permission, and probably get it.
The motion is to authorize the use of the bus. Did you have a comment, Mr. Administrator?
No, I was just going to say, Your Worship, that if we're looking at true cost allocation of this, it probably should more properly come out of grant and aid. That's what we do.
Whatever.
Providing a grant to the society.
Well, unless the treasurer needs advice from council, I intend to leave it up to him. Hearing no other speakers, all those in favor? Carried. Item 5, a letter from the city solicitor regarding the Golf Society. The resolution recommended is contained.
I move that the resolution be adopted by council as stated.
Second.
Already read it.
This is not open.
Thank you. I just
Speakers for the motion?
Question. Question on the motion.
If I can, I'll just be really brief. I wanted to make my own comment that I think it's a very good sign of good faith by the community to participate in the golf course expansion in this way. We need only look elsewhere to see how a confrontational approach could have led us down an entirely different path than we've found here. And we're going to have our community cake and eat it too. We're going to have a golf course, which is a community operation, not a private club. It's available to the general public, largely senior people in our community. It's available for tourism generation. We get to keep our Rosemont Park. We've taken our first steps to expand it and preserve it. Generally, I think we could be very proud of this solution to the problem and very proud of the general community's participation. And I hope if anybody finds themselves under political attack for this participation, that they'll reflect that very positive contribution and participation. And with that spirit, thank you for listening.
Good.
You've called for the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6 is requests. The first from a Mrs. McLean for a license to sell from a city sidewalk. If you like, actually, in order that they're dealt with at the same time, you could bring forward item 5 late, a similar application from a street vendor. And perhaps we should invite the administrator. Actually, we should in all cases, but particularly on this, Mr. Administrator, perhaps you could give us your advice.
Well, Worship, there's two issues involved here. First of all is the business license itself, and I guess secondly is the license or the permission from the city to use, city streets or public property to carry on a business. And that would require a similar kind of license or permit that you just issued to Waite's News for their ice cream stand and to the Main Street Diner for using the sidewalk for their chairs for their restaurant and Woolworths and so on. The other downside, I guess, of this situation is there could be some concerns expressed by the resident businesses who pay taxes and who are going to have to sort of live side by side with this type of an operation on the street.
Alderman Horswill.
I'm wondering if this isn't raising what ought to be considered as a fairly serious longer-term question and merits a serious examination, because I think we're going to get increasing requests of this type along with increasing requests for buskers and the like, and it brings up the whole question of what kind of activity do we want to have on our downtown area, and we maybe need to be asking the Heritage Committee or the Planning Commission or maybe even select another group, the Arts group that are dealing with the strong communities in the 90s. I think there's some opportunities which could be very valuable to the community in this whole area, but there's also some serious risk if it's badly managed, that it can be a real public relations disaster with the business community and a bit of a hodgepodge in terms of what's happening. So rather than dealing with these things on an ad hoc, one-off basis, I'd like to have the larger question looked at and maybe a system put in place for dealing with these kinds of requests that considers the professional quality of the items that are involved and the other issues in terms of is it treading on the toes of existing businesses and so forth, so that there's some way of adjudicating them other than just council saying yes or no to each occasion.
Alderman Neville.
You wish, but partly in response to Alderman Horswill, I also partly agree with what he said. I think it's just at the last meeting we asked staff to review the license bylaw, and it'd been my suggestion for these kind of requests we allow them for a limited time period, say 1, 2, or 3 months, and then if we have problems with them or objections, then we don't need to renew them. That would probably solve the problem.
Yeah, I'd like to take the advice of staff on what the councillors are saying, and To be honest, some of this is so innocuous as to be hardly worthy of writing business licenses for. Most of it, you just want to see it, enjoy it, ignore it, and when it's a problem, guide them, move them along, put them in a place where they don't offend temporarily, because it's very transient, and yet it can also be decorative to the street and interesting. And I'd take the advice of staff, but I'd like to see a council resolution. I'm going to be very clear about this. I'd like to see a council resolution authorizing these two street vendors for the balance of the summer, let's say until Labor Day or something, authorize it by council resolution, perhaps without business license, but with location to be guided by, let's say, the building inspector, that if they become a problem in one place or a particular location they choose is not preferred by the adjacent tenant, that they could be asked to go somewhere else. Do you think we can get away with that, Mr. Administrator? I know I'm asking for trouble because we're without a legal framework, but this is so innocuous and there's so little of the season left. I mean, if you ask these people for $60 and put them through a procedural rigmarole, you're basically running them out of town on a rail, and yet they're harmless.
Well, I guess my only comment, Your Worship, would be if council are going to permit this kind of activity, then it should be by way of this license agreement, similar to what we have with other sidewalk users, so that if the city does get complaints or there are problems, they can be legally dealt with.
Okay, a license agreement, what would the cost be on that? Is that in the license bylaw, the business license?
Well, I'm speaking now of a separate agreement between the city and the individual, granting him permission to use city sidewalks in specific locations, subject to certain conditions.
And the authority for those exists now?
Yes, council have already issued a number of those. That's separate from the business license fee itself and the bylaw.
But would these require full business licenses?
They should have full business licenses as well, Your Worship, to be consistent.
For a full year, or do we prorate it for half years?
It's on an annual basis.
It can be prorated for half a year now, after
July 31st.
July 31st. We're so close to that. But we have had, sorry, we have had several complaints with the one person, so council should be aware that there are people who do business on Baker Street that are not in favor of this sort of activity.
Alderman Horswill is right. We're getting more and more interested, more and more requests for that kind of activity. So there's going to need to be a policy and some kind of a framework.
Well, Alderman Neville, before we move to a motion, I'm hoping to hammer out something that'll be a nice compromise and allow the quaint activity that's happened so far to continue, but with some control. Perhaps you'd entertain a motion to issue a, what did you call it, Mr. Ormond, a license to what?
A license, a permit to use city, to sell his wares on public property, including city Baker Street.
Okay, with a business license.
Yeah, I'd move it with the business license.
And would we entertain that their location be guided by the city building inspector? Mr. Administrator, what do you think?
Well, we should have the locations defined in the agreement itself, in terms of if you're going to restrict it to Baker Street and specific areas on Baker Street.
And I think you would have some agreement from the merchants that would agree that they could be in front of their businesses that would be easier to control. If they keep moving about and they get in front of somebody who sells a similar product, that's where you get the problem.
That's right. But you're also not going to actively get any merchant to agree that he wants that particular person there. You think you would?
You know, there's a couple that aren't upset about it.
Really?
That don't mind them being there.
Okay, so maybe we can, by the resolution, leave it in the hands of the applicant to find a location where the proprietor adjacent is willing. Does that sound good?
That's all in that motion that Alderman Neville just made.
Part of the condition.
Okay. Thanks, Alderman Neville. We're hammering something out here. Who was seconding?
I'll second.
Appreciate. All those in favor then? Carried. I don't know whether we've got something there or not.
Your
Probably
Worship,
what
I'd
we've
like
got
to
is
move
trouble.
that the administration, as part of the review of the business license, consider the question of these kinds of seasonal requests for selling on the street or performing on the street as a matter for long-term policy.
I'll second the motion.
Question?
You didn't want some kind of committee involvement in
Well,
that, because the bylaw is pretty technical, and this is pretty subjective.
Well, I think at this point, administration it might wish to recommend that there be some kind of committee involvement to help adjudicate these requests in the long term, but I think at this point, administration can deal with it as far as bringing an approach to council that would help us get through these kinds of questions without dealing them on an ad hoc basis.
Thanks, Alderman Horswill. No more discussion? All those in favor then? Carried. Item 6B, Nelson University Centre, inviting a proclamation and permission to hang a banner.
I move we approve the request for August 5th to the 11th.
I second it, but it's August 26th, isn't it?
5th to 11th.
Oh, 5th to 11th. I second that.
All right, proclamation and banner requires unanimous consent required. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
We can have any date.
Item 7, fire protection agreement with rural area.
I move the resolution requiring the mayor clerk to sign the fire protection agreement.
Second.
All those in favor? Carried. The tax exemption bylaw available for adoption.
Move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? Carried. To the late item list, a letter from Welcome Wagon inviting a proclamation. We should choose the dates. I think they're looking at next week, July 30 to August 5.
I move we grant the request.
Second. I'd just like to say thank you to the two ladies who do the Welcome Wagon in the morning, which I think they do a lot of good and create a lot of goodwill in the community. They don't get much recognition themselves.
On the proclamation, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Carried. And they invite the city to fly the Welcome Wagon flag. Welcome Wagon is a business, and I caution that that might not be appropriate. I wonder if Mrs. Olson or Mr. Ormond can advise us on the appropriateness of flying what's really a company flag. Any opinion to offer?
I think Your Worship, the nature of the activity is certainly it's advancing the interests of the community. I see that it's going to be a problem, conflict.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Administrator. You hear the Administrator's advice. I don't know if we need a resolution. If I don't hear one, we'll invite Mr. Schneider to obtain and fly the flag. Or do you want to resolve to fly the flag during that week? Moved.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor? Carried and done.